What advice would you give to the incoming administration about how to do that and how to do it effectively?
Well, I do think there are some parallels. If only Mitch McConnell was a thorn in the side of both of those. And I think the thought in 2009, if you remember, was let's do some, and if things remain bad, we'll just do more. But Mitch McConnell saw to it that there would not be more. So I think if you look at the incoming Biden administration, they're probably going to put some significant focus on try to get as much direct relief as you can as early as you can because the economy needs it. Now, one difference is in 2009, that was traditional stimulus. The U.S. government's going to spend money, try to get growth jump started. This is different. I mean, this is a temporary wave that's spread over us, and we basically need to figure out a way to hold our breath for 6 or 8 months until the vaccine can be widely available and we can go back to doing what we were doing before. So our goal is to try to prevent permanent damage, which is a little different from stimulus. But I hope that they can agree to do something. I mean, we need the money right now.
Well, and that goes to the question that's been pending, frankly, since July 31, when the supplementary unemployment benefits went away. The question is, do you hold out for the full loaf or take half a loaf? Thus far, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, she's come down off of her $3.3 trillion, but still, she's insisted on a lot. Would you advise the incoming president to say, take what you can get during this lame duck session?
I guess I disagree a little bit with the premise of that question. We need as much as we can get as soon as we can get it. My perception of what's happening is not that the Democrats are holding out. It's that, once again, like in 2009, Mitch McConnell has decided that a deal is not favorable to him before these Georgia runoff elections. And so it's not primarily a dispute about the size of the rescue. It's about one side not wanting there to be a bill at all. So I think if Mnuchin and Pelosi were the only two deciders, they would have been able to reach an agreement. I mean, they were close on numbers and how long it would last. I just think the politics of this whole thing is quite complicated in the lame duck.
Well, that's sobering because, as you suggest, if it's a question of not giving the other side credit for something before those runoff elections, that suggests we're not going to have anything until into the new year.
And I'm quite afraid of that because, as you say, look, the unemployment money ran out. The CARES Act money through the PPP program that was going to help give a lifeline to small business, that money's run out. And the Treasury, you saw last week, said they're going to withdraw the money for the Fed Main Street lending facility. So that money's not going to be there. So I think this issue that we are inches away from having permanent damage that we did not have to have, that I think everybody should find sobering.
So, Austan, talk about that permanent damage, as you put it, because there's a great deal of hope that a vaccine is coming. It's not here yet. It'll probably be at least into the middle of next year before it really is widely disseminated. And so we need a bridge to get there. What kind of damage can happen in the meantime? Because some people might say, well, let's just wait. We'll get the vaccine. We'll be okay in the long run.
Yeah, but we need the bridge, like you said. And the alternative is falling down in the water. And there are literally millions of businesses around the country that I would say they're going to go bankrupt. But as you know, something like 90% of business closures they can't afford to go through bankruptcy. They just shut the doors and they're never heard from again. And that's a space that we absolutely don't want to have to go down. But right now we're on path to. Two, in all the states and pretty much all the major cities of the country, they're having revenue shortages like they've never seen, with expenses that are up dramatically because of the pandemic. And they're going to have to start laying off policemen, firefighters, teachers, and a whole bunch of state services that we kind of need at a moment like this. So I think those are the two big speed bumps that I fear. And then the third is, underlying this whole thing, the virus is the boss. And if you cannot get control of the spread of this virus until the middle of next year when the vaccine comes, there's going to be thousands, there will be thousands of people who die unnecessarily. There will be tens of thousands of people who are hospitalized or suffer permanent health damage permanently, unnecessarily. So I really hope that Congress does as big a package of relief as they can as rapidly as possible so we don't get people evicted from their homes. I mean, millions of people are going to get evicted.
So Austan, talk about the perhaps medium term. We now have at least the key players in President-elect Biden's economic team, led, of course, by Janet Yellen as Secretary of Treasury, but a fair number of other people, many of whom you've worked with, including in the White House. People are trying to read into it exactly how progressive his economic policies are going to be. What do you read into it?
I found the team really impressive. I mean, Janet Yellen is a rock star, of course, and well known. But down the line, if you look at the people they're appointing, they have experience. They're low drama people. I think the thematic focus, if you had to say, is there a thematic focus? Certainly at the Council of Economic Advisors, you got a heavy focus on workers with experience on wages, on training, on contingent workers, and it shows an emphasis on wages and workers. As to what does it mean for the agenda? Of course, all of that hinges on what happens in the election, and are Democrats going to control the Senate or not control the Senate, because that will have a heavy influence on what they can actually do in legislation.
Austan, you make a very important point, I think, that the names I've seen so far, there is an emphasis on labor economists, some very distinguished labor economists, no question about it. At the same time, do they have enough macroeconomists? Is that a possible weakness of this team? Because you could have problems come up, if you've seen, that are outside the world of labor, and you need a really crackerjack macroeconomist in there.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to cover more topics than you have people. I would imagine as they fill out the team, you'll have more focus on tax and budget. You'll have more focus on macro. Several of the people that they're talking about, Jared Bernstein, Heather Boucher, do have some macro exposure as well as the labor economics exposure. I think the Janet Yellen at Treasury, in a way, serving as your Babe Ruth, it gives you some. There's nobody knows more about macro, nobody knows more about international, about banking than the former chair of the Fed, who's now the Secretary of the Treasury. So I do think they kind of got themselves some breathing room for whatever other focus they want to have.
Nobody's going to question Janet Yellen's competence as a first-rate economist. At the same time, there's another part to that job, which has to do with foreign diplomacy and sanctions and things like that. How's she going to cover that base? Because that's not something she spent a lot of time on.
Yes and no. The number two at Treasury is somebody who's got a heavy international focus. And she's known, unlike most, she's got to be the most internationally recognized Secretary of the Treasury in a very long time. I mean, from her connections, having been the Fed chair, I would think that the international issues are not going to be foreign to her. They're going to be somewhat familiar. Yeah. And to the extent that in the last 2 weeks you've seen a blow up in the relationship between the Fed and the Treasury at a moment when you kind of don't want blow ups in the relationship between the Fed and the Treasury. That would give you some comfort. Hey, it's good to know that the Secretary of the Treasury knows very well the issues of the Fed and is going to get along very well with.
She knows Jay Powell pretty well, I think it's fair to say. Thank you so much, Austan. Always a treat to talk with you. That's Austan Goolsbee. He's